This is the assignment launch for the first animal behaviour assignment, which is the behavioural management and training report. The first thing to look at then is the learning outcomes. So within this specific report, you're going to be assessed on 2 learning outcomes. So the first of these is to evaluate the etiology of common behavioural problems in a named species and consider appropriate modifications in a veterinary setting. And learning outcome 3 is critique the merits of various training and behaviour modification methods and their effects on animal behaviour. So in terms of the actual assignment then, you're required to write a report which discusses one of the following behavioural conditions in the domesticated dog or cat. So these are your choices. So you can either choose separation anxiety, interspecies aggression, or noise phobia. And in terms of the choice of the behavioural condition, it is entirely up to you. And you either write about the domesticated dog or the domesticated cat. One thing I would encourage you to do before you launch into writing the report is to make sure that you do enough research and actually confirm that it is a current concern in your chosen species. Now, all species have the potential to experience all 3 of these conditions, but certainly you will find that there is more research surrounding separation anxiety, for example, in the dog versus the cat. And you may well find that there is slightly more research around noise phobia in dogs rather than cats. But as I say, it is entirely up to you which species you pick. But in order to meet the learning outcome, you also need to include within your report an evaluation of the etiology. So what causes the behavioural condition? You might like to look at specific breed or species specific characteristics. Potentially you might want to look at kind of evolution of behaviour, or more around the kind of status of the species, as sometimes that does impact the reason for the specific behavioural conditions. For example, with dogs, there is a discussion around separation anxiety and the attachment that dogs have developed with humans as being one of the reasons for separation anxiety. So as I say, have a look at the research, and because it's a discussion, the idea is that you use the research that is available and just develop as many different theories around the etiology as possible. And then the second half of the report is looking at appropriate methods to modify the behaviour or training methods designed to reduce or remove. So again, these will be specific to your chosen condition. And in terms of behavioural modification methods, these may well be environmental adjustments. It might be use of, for example, pheromones. It might well be specific feeding protocols, for example. But equally, you could discuss kind of training methods, and with all of these behaviours, because they are normally kind of natural accepted behaviours, but certainly in the context that they're in, they become problematic. What we're trying to do is first reduce them, and then potentially, if it's possible, remove them altogether. But you might find that with your specific behaviour that it's simply not possible to remove it, so therefore a reduction plan would be absolutely fine. But remember, key thing is to look at as much different research as possible and then bring together all of those research points into your report.
So in terms of the specific requirements for this assignment, as with all other assignments so far, you are expected to read widely for this assignment, and those sources should be of good quality. Now, with behaviour, it's particularly important because there are lots of websites available that will give information about behavioural modification potentially, or give them information, kind of tips and guidance around how to modify or how to improve behavioural concerns. But a lot of these websites are presented by non-credited sources. So do make sure that you are focusing initially on peer-reviewed journals, and then if you are looking at websites, do make sure that they're presented from a reputable source, so whether that is a certified animal behaviourist or the British Association of Animal Behaviourists, something as we discussed in class would be the best option. You can use textbooks if you want to. But just bear in mind that you do need to consider the currency of that textbook. As with all things, behavioural guidance does change, and certainly if a textbook is out of date, then you have got the risk of presenting out of date source information. Just to remind you as well, we are following APA 7th edition. I realise it's been a little bit of time since you guys had to do any referencing, so please do visit the University of Portsmouth referencing website, which can be found on your LEG group tutorial homepage, and it will take you through step by step how to present each type of reference source. In terms of word count, so the word count for this particular assignment is 1,500 words, plus or minus 10%, and do try and be as concise as possible in your writing. We do know that students who unfortunately struggle with waffle, you might find that you don't necessarily provide the right level of detail or the right level of analysis that we expect at level 5. Equally, if you write less than the 10%, you're just not going to provide the detail or the demonstration of understanding that we would expect. So it's 1,500 words, 10% either way is absolutely fine. And please remember to include your word count in your submission. It can go in the header or the footer or on the front page. It's entirely up to you, but please make sure you include it. As per your assignments last time, it is an electronic submission, so this electronic submission point is up on LEG already, so just make sure that you give yourself ample time to submit them, and the deadline for this assignment is Tuesday the 5th of April by 1 minute to midnight. That would take you into Wednesday morning. As per previous years, a late submission, even if it's only a few minutes late, will result in a 40% cap. So please do make sure that you give yourself ample time to upload the assignments. And unfortunately, IT is not a source of extenuating circumstance. So make sure that you save everything, you back it up, and you upload in plenty of time.
So the last thing just to do is to go through the grading criteria, because it's always quite helpful to look at what's expected. So this is the level 5 grading criteria, and as you can see, I've just pulled out the 40 and the 60. So in order to pass as a bare pass, you do need to be addressing the topic and demonstrating sound analysis and discussion. And I think that's really the key part of this report, is whilst you want to describe the particular condition, the emphasis should be on evaluation and analysis of etiology and then the training or modification methods. So do bear that in mind when you're constructing your report, and think about it in terms of your the split in words, to make sure that you give yourself enough words to be able to actually perform an analysis, because analysis is required at 40, so it's a basic expectation. Equally, with your research, you want to make sure that you use a range of relevant research and use subject convention, so APA 7th edition. But for 40%, you are allowed to have minor errors, so these are quite consistent, and that's the reason for your drop in mark. But equally, there needs to be good organisation, structure, use of language, spelling, grammar, etc. So again, just to encourage you, do make sure you give yourself time to proofread your work. Certainly at level 5, I would hope that there would be very few spelling and grammatical errors, and certainly if you have your spell checker on or your grammar checker, there is really no excuse. I certainly don't want to see spelling errors underlined and within your work now that it's an electronic submission. For the 60% then, so we're looking at a very good piece of work that covers the subject matter well and is clearly and lucidly written. And the key thing is that there is a very good attempt to discuss and consider the material presented. So we would expect there to be a nice level of critique of the behaviour modification methods, and a good depth of evaluation surrounding the etiology. Again, in terms of the referencing, needs to be a good range of current and relevant research, and the key thing is that your subject convention should have no errors at all. So do remember, if there are errors in your citations at level 5, you cannot achieve more than a 58. So as I say, do take the time, and as I said before, if you do need some extra help, do give me a shout, because I can certainly share some more resources with you. And again, in terms of your organisation, we're looking at a nice clear structure, good use of language, good flow of language, and excellent standards of grammar and spelling and punctuation. So do bear that in mind. As it is a report, you obviously have the use of tables and images if you wish to. It's certainly not required. It's not an essential requirement. But if you find that it helps with your explanation of particularly the behavioural concern itself, then of course do use tables and diagrams. But just remember, the table should be summarising in content. So again, don't use it as an excuse to simply chuck loads of content into a table, because again, that will impact your overall mark.
Okay, so hopefully that's given a bit of an insight into this assignment. As always, if you have got any specific questions, do feel free to email me directly. Also, if you'd like to have an individual tutorial, now that you're back off placement, we can facilitate that slightly easier. So please just drop me an email if you have got any specific questions or requests. The other option is I have created a Ledge discussion forum on Ledge, which if you feel that your question is more generic or more generalised, it's quite helpful if you can put your questions into that Ledge forum, just because it gives the opportunity for other people who may have the same question to have it answered at the same time. But hopefully it will be a really nice assignment, and hopefully you'll have a good time exploring the topics. But any questions at all, please just drop me an email.